Welcome to the Indie PPC Podcast. I am your host, Joey Bittner, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about how I use ChatGPT to help analyze my search intent, and particularly how search intent changes over time in my search term reports. I find this can be wildly helpful when trying to explain why data might shift. Sometimes it's not always buried in the numbers, but it's just about how the algorithm starts gravitating to higher or lower parts of the funnel of the consumer journey. And ChatGPT is incredible at deciphering this. It's not just a tool for analyzing data, obviously. We can use it to analyze the search intent behind our search term reports. Beyond that, we're also going to cover an interesting topic in another podcast about Google Ads from Fred Vallaeys at Optimizer. He had a pretty mind-bending episode with Mathieu Trinvan, and they talk about a lot of things, but I primarily want to bring up one part in their discussion that just kind of had me rethinking what the future of account structures might look like. So yeah, I want to share that just as our mind-bending article of the week. So I absolutely love using ChatGPT for my search term intent. It's not just a tool for helping you analyze your data, but you can really get a sense of the different buckets of intent that appear in your search term report. So I think this is really important because a lot of the times we're not looking at our search term report holistically. We're looking at as, I want to negative this one word, or this isn't my target, or what I want to talk about is shifting how we look at our search term report and analyzing it more as buckets of intent. So for example, what % of your search terms are symptom searches? What % of your search terms are information searches? How much of your search term report are comparative brand searches? Or if you're talking e-commerce, high funnel searches versus low funnel searches. This kind of analysis is really hard to do if you're just looking at your search terms one at a time by hand as a human. But this is where ChatGPT can be really helpful, because in a second, it will be able to bucket your search terms into these different pools of intent and tell you how much you're spending on each, what the conversion rate is. And the really important part is seeing how this shifts. With smart bidding, when you change your smart bidding goals, often what's happening is the algorithm is starting to move your dollars up and down the funnel or through these different pools of search intent. And it's important for us to observe how that shifts. So in a little bit, I'm going to share a use case where I had a client, an e-commerce client, who had a pretty big drop in conversion rate after I changed the TROAS goal. And after looking at the data, there was no massive swings in any pivotal pieces of data. The last thing I can think of is what if it's just no longer spending as much on those low funnel terms, right? What if the algorithm has just started going a little bit higher funnel? So I want to share this example, and I'm actually going to take you through my prompt, my process, and how I successfully used ChatGPT to see this shift in intent and how it resulted in a drop in my conversion rate. So going right into the example. So this is a client that sells high-end Japanese kitchen knives, right? And first, the important part is to understand what our points in the funnel are, right? We have high funnel, which is anybody who just searches for a kitchen knife, a chef knife. They don't know what type of knife they want yet, and they don't know what brand of knife they want yet. Those are considered high funnel and typically have lower conversion rates, cheaper CPCs. Then we have mid funnel, which is people who know what type of knife they want. So this is, they're searching Santoku knife, bunka knife, forged Japanese knife. They know what type they want. Middle of the funnel, slightly more purchase intent, usually slightly more expensive CPCs. Then we have bottom of the funnel. This is somebody who's far along in their purchase journey, and they're looking for the exact brand or model of the knife that they've already done a bunch of research for. This has the highest conversion rate, purchase intent, and usually the most expensive CPCs. So The first thing we need to do is, one, explain this to ChatGPT and get a few search term reports from ChatGPT. So in this case, I had I'm looking at 3-week period of time where my conversion rate dropped by like 30%. So I export 2 search terms. One of the 3 weeks before this data shift, and that signals before I made the change in my TROAS goal, and the other, the 3 weeks after. Now, you also need to do a little bit of formatting on the sheet. You need to open it in Excel and remove the top 2 columns. Google, when you export your search terms, they're always going to have like one row that has the date and one row that says something else. You need to remove these. So the first row is the title of the columns, right? And then you have to scroll all the way to the bottom and remove all these summary rows. There's going to be rows that like basically add up all of your data. And if you import with these columns, it's going to confuse ChatGPT. It's going to think that those are columns of data. Anyway, so you're going to always want to remove these, okay? So you import these to ChatGPT, and then you just explain your funnel and explain what you want. So I'm going to literally read my prompt. It might be a bit repetitive because I just explained my funnel to you, but whatever, you're here with me. Attached are 2 search term reports from my client. Each search term report contains terms from 2 periods of time, the before and the after. The after signifies a time period with a 30% drop in conversions as we increased our spend. Oh, that was it. I actually didn't increase the TROAS goal. Sorry, I increased our spend at this date. My apologies. I want to see if the search intent follows the conversion rate trend to see if the added spend went towards high funnel search terms. We identify the funnel in 3 parts. High funnel is people looking for kitchen knives, Japanese knives, chef's knives in general. Middle of the funnel is when somebody is looking for a specific type of knife. And low funnel is people looking for a specific brand or model. Please look at both reports and tell me what % of the terms fall in either parts of these funnel, and ignore 0 clicks or costs of search terms. That's an important part. You always need to say to ignore the 0 clicks, because your search term report is going to have a ton of 0 clicks. Even if you filter them out, often they'll still be in there. So I always say ignore it. So ChatGPT gets right to work and it says, okay, great, no problem. Let's classify these search terms. And it plops out like a beautiful little table that says, okay, the before period, your high funnel was 45% of your searches were high funnel, 14% was mid funnel, and 40% was low funnel. The after period, 55.4% were high funnel, 13.5% were low funnel, and 30% were low funnel. 13.5 were mid funnel, 30% were low funnel. So, and then it says the after period shows a clear shift towards high funnel searches and fewer low funnel searches. The proof is right there, right? Now, it's hard to say if this 10% shift was the result of a 30% drop in conversion rate, but it is some proof that when I made this change, and again, my apologies for the correction, it wasn't a TROAS change, it was a spend increase. And I didn't change the TROAS. So I increased the spend, and I wanted to see where Google spent those dollars. And they clearly spent that extra budget in the high funnel category, which has a lower conversion rate. Now, you can keep going with this. It then gives you, okay, here are the ad groups with the biggest swings of intent. Now, this is what's interesting. Not necessarily the swings of performance, because I can just see that with my structure. But it says, here are the following ad groups that had the largest % swings of funnel distribution, which is the click volume of either part of the funnel. So it gives you those in a %, which is great. And then if I want to show this to my client, I can say, okay, can you also make me a bar chart comparing the before and after period of either parts of the funnel? So this is just the tip of the iceberg too. Like I said, you can use this not just for e-commerce, but I use it a lot for understanding my search terms and their swings in lead generation, right? Let's say you're like a foundation company, you fix foundations. What % of your search terms are related to how-to or information searches? Sure, you could create a filter with how to in it and see the search terms in Google Ads that have how to. But what's interesting about this is it's not just going to look at the words how to, it's going to look at the intent of DIY how to. So it's going to put together everything that it identifies as that type of search. I just think it's worth its $20 a month to do this if you can't upload sheets directly to ChatGPT, because I use this. It's probably my single most used tool in ChatGPT that I use almost weekly on some account as I'm trying to still keep an eye on my search terms and how they fluctuate. So, oh, and I should mention what I did after. So after I got this analysis, the question is, okay, what do we do now? So I wanted to see if I could then, because we still want to spend this more budget. We're moving into a busy season. We're slowly increasing our spend. It's not to say, oh, I just revert the budget and everything's going to go back the way before. No, I want to move forward. So I was like, okay, well, if you've listened to me before, you know that I'm usually a big fan of low TROAS goals or high CPA goals, because I like to give the algorithm wiggle room to experiment. So that the TROAS was not very high on this. So I figure, okay, I'm going to increase the TROAS goal because I want to signal to Google that I need you to focus more on these low funnel terms, right? And then what I'm going to observe is give that 3 weeks, same time period. And then I'm going to observe that 3-week period to the last 3-week period and see if that weight corrected. Now, I will also say that because I increased the TROAS goal, another thing we need to monitor though is, sure, it might go for more low funnel traffic, but then does that mean it's going to be remarketing more, right? That's always the risk in increasing your TROAS goal. It's going to start going after warm traffic. And we always want to have a healthy amount of new customers in our pipeline, new website visitors. So I use a number of tools to measure new customer acquisition as well as new visit user flow. I'll get into that in another video when I start talking about my tech stack. But it's something that you can observe in most website backends, like Shopify, for example. When you make that TROAS increase, did your new customer rate tank? If that's the case, you know it's just showing to previous customers as low-hanging fruit. So anyways, now I'm starting to digress. But the point is, using ChatGPT to observe search intent over periods of time is a freaking game changer. Now, it is still a bit of a pain in the ass that you have to import your sheets all the time. I've been waiting for a tool that integrates directly to Google Ads, so the data's always there and we can talk to it. I have tested a few things. There's a few platforms out there and a few automations that connect to the API. I've tried 2 different ones and neither worked well. They always had errors or just missed out chunks of data. So it's not there yet from what I have found to have a seamless integration. So for now, I'm still uploading these sheets into ChatGPT when I need this kind of analysis. So up next, I want to talk about an interesting podcast episode from another channel that really got me thinking. The whole point of this segment of the show is to highlight something that I either read or listened to that got me thinking out of the box. And this is, again, something that all managers should do. We always need to be influenced by outside sources to challenge our way of thinking. Now, one of my favorite channels is Optimizer. It's a platform. They've got a channel hosted by Fred Vallaeys. And they've got this one series called Automation Layering Masterclass. And it's actually a show that I was on once. But it's a program that is about how to use automation in your manual management and how to layer data to do nerdy things. And they had this episode recently, just last week, with Mathieu Trinvan. He is one of my favorite thought leaders. He's been on this show before, and whenever he gets on, he always drops gold. It's very technical, but very strategic. Great episode. I'm not going to go into the whole episode. I'll leave that to you to listen to it and form your own opinions of everything they talked about. But there was one strategy that he spoke about that just really got me thinking out of the box. It was something that I also disagreed with a lot of what he said, but again, it got me thinking, and that's the juicy part of this. So close to the beginning of the show, around the 5-minute mark, Mathieu starts talking about a strategy of what he calls like making broad match work. And he talks about this strategy that more or less is a bit of a different take on how you transition from broad match to exact match. Now, in summary, it's basically this strategy where you start with a bunch of broad match keywords, and then as you start to see success in the keywords, you make exact match copies of them, and you more or less let them run alongside your broad match keywords. Sometimes you put them into different campaigns to have different goals and performance targets. And more or less what I took from it was this strategy of leveraging the individual signal in different ways, but letting things all kind of run alongside each other. And I'm not going to lie, this raised a lot of red flags in my soul because in the end, it was like a massive structure of cannibalization, right? Cannibalization is a term that we use when you have two ad groups or campaigns or even keywords that can trigger the same search term. So for the last 5 years since, or maybe longer than that, since keywords started matching to close variants, we've kind of as a community all agreed that a structure that is built around search intent is the best one, right? Ad groups for each service you offer or product type, and a small list of keywords so you can avoid that cannibalization, so you can know exactly what works. Now, this is starting to break a little bit because keywords are getting more and more loose, right? Even though there hasn't been any like massive public announcement about match types changing over the last year or so, I've seen this in my accounts and a lot of other people have talked about this. Like phrase match is also not what it used to be. It's a lot looser. So I can kind of see where Mathieu is coming from in allowing the system to be loose and instead focusing back on the individual signals that get performance and leveraging the data that is collected on this keyword as opposed to trying to put search terms in clean buckets. And this is what I thought was interesting. Again, I still don't necessarily agree with it. I am not going to restructure my accounts. All my accounts are still structured by search intent. But it got me thinking about that shift and how Google is going in this direction of, I hate to use the word, but a keywordless future, but like a search theme future, right? Anyways, now I'm starting to ramble, but I just thought it was a really interesting article that again got me rethinking what the future might be if this trajectory continues of keywords no longer being real levers of control. If it's all, homogenized anyways, why not splice things up into various buckets that are running alongside each other and again, leveraging the data that's stored at that target's level to push and pull. But anyways, I'll leave a link in the show notes to the episode and give it a listen and let me know what you think. So that's it for today's show. I hope you learned something about using ChatGPT. And if anybody has a question they'd like answered on the show, that was one part of the show we did not do today, feel free to write me an email at info@joeybittner.com, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a private message, or leave a comment on this video on YouTube, and I'll be sure to answer your question on the show. All right, see you next time.